Yeah, I look forward to speaking to you about key trends in leadership, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Judith Haupt. You can already hear I'm pronouncing it a little bit strangely. I'm half South African, half German. Very happy to be living in South Africa and have a lot of family here. So I feel very grounded, rooted here. I worked for Contract, the company that I represent in Germany, founded Contract here in South Africa in 2008. Built up the company, built up a team, and have been in the space of human resource development, organizational development, leadership development for, I think, 15, 16 years now. And have worked with leaders in Germany, throughout Europe, in South Africa, and throughout the world now through COVID. Very privileged to do quite a lot of work online as well. I'm a mom of 2 kids, 9 and 13. I live here in Cape Town. I'm very passionate about women in leadership. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And I do a lot of work one-on-one in executive coaching. I lead strategy developments with senior teams. I do team developments and lead leadership journeys for leaders in organizations. So this topic of leadership trends obviously is a fascinating one to me. And I'm very happy to be talking with you about it today. So, I've named it Leadership Trends for 2023 and Beyond. And I will be talking to you about 3 main trends that I'm noticing. And I'm quite curious to hear from you a little bit later, just how does that resonate with you? What does that do for you when you hear about that? Do you see that also in your environments? I'd like to start with where we are in our world at the moment. So I don't think I have to tell you, but I will. We live in pretty extraordinary times at the moment. We have climate change. We have technological disruption. We have a mental health crisis. We have social instability. We have a fracturing world. So lots and lots of hectic things happening, actually, lots of risks, but also lots of opportunity, I think, to rethink how we work and how we live, and need to rethink how we work and live, actually. I'm noticing that a lot of leaders that I work with are feeling quite overwhelmed, overburdened, are struggling with the complexity at the moment. They have to do so much in so little time. And I'm noticing quite a lot of overwhelm, burnout, and also a loss of motivation at times, because it just feels too much. Then there's the whole thing of AI, digital transformation. We don't even really know how that interaction between human beings and AI will be. We know that humans will have a role, but what role will we play? And it'll change a lot for us. At the same time of that overwhelm of leaders, I also feel quite strongly that actually leaders are some of the main people that will actually carry forward whatever transformation, whatever change we are going to make in our world. So as leaders, as overwhelmed as we are, we also play such an important role in how we change things and what we do in our organizations and actually in our world. Before I start talking to you about the first trend, I'd like to ask you 2 questions. And in fact, you can choose a question, whichever one is easier for you to answer. And I'd love you to answer it for yourself. What parts of yourself do you maybe not like showing at work? It's like it's a part that you might keep hidden away a little bit. Or what qualities and strengths do you maybe have that you feel at this point you can't really bring in your work? So think about that for a moment and just keep that in mind for yourself. So think of 1 or 2 qualities or strengths or traits of yours that you don't really like showing, parts of you that you don't like showing. I see some people nodding. You've got some parts. Keep them in mind. I'll come back to them. The first trend and need, in a way, that I want to talk to you about around leadership and leading into the future is something that I've named leadership and reinvention. Reinvention is something that we as a team are looking at quite strongly with our clients. What I want to be talking to you about, and I don't know how well you can see the subtitle, but the subtitle, I've called it Shifting Mindsets for Innovation, Creativity, and New Solutions. So if you look at what I've just said about the world and the world we're finding ourselves in, I think we need new ideas around how to tackle things. We need to approach things differently. At the end of last year, PwC did a very big survey with about, I think, 4,500 leaders in over 100 countries. And they asked them quite a lot of questions about their role as CEOs, how they saw their businesses. And they were asking questions such as, what's the half-life of your business? How do you see the climate clock affecting your business? How do you see economic and social risks? What's your role in this? How do you empower your organization moving into the future? And what happened was a lot of these CEOs said, we actually need to evolve, otherwise we'll die. And they said it's such a paradox. We have to win today's race while we already run tomorrow's. We have to kind of deal with it today, but we really, really have to think about tomorrow, otherwise we don't have a chance. I want to just show you that, for instance, almost 60% of them said, if we don't do something and change in the next 10 years, we're going to be obsolete. Like, we just won't exist anymore. So there's a very high awareness in CEOs that we do need to constantly evolve. And this element of reinvention is basically referring to the fact that we used to think change is something that is a project. We'd have to change from X to Y and it's beginning and end. And we can plan it like a project. And I don't have to tell you because I know you know this, but basically change is the leader's job at this point. That's what leaders do. We do change all the time. And I actually think that the word reinvention is a more fitting word. We have to continuously reinvent ourselves, our organizations, our products, the way we do things, our services. And not only because of everything we're facing in this world, but also because everything is accelerating. The business cycles, the life cycle of businesses are speeding up. And I love this one. If you think about it, businesses go from startup stage to growth to maturity, and yes, then they face a decline often. Up until the 1990s, a life cycle of a business was on average about 75 years. So that's pretty long, right? And then when you look at the next figure, in 2010, it was already a lot shorter. It was already 15 years. So businesses went from starting to maturity to decline a lot quicker. And now guess where we are at the moment, or where we were last year. What would you say is the number now? What's the sort of average life cycle of a business today, overall? 6, 7. We might have some reinvention practitioners in the room who actually know this one. So 6 years. 6 years from 75 years. Can you imagine? This is how quickly businesses grow, but also decline and actually end and don't make it if they don't stay up to speed. And I don't actually want to tell you any of these stories, but I think you'll recognize some of these brands that, that didn't make it because they didn't evolve, because they didn't survive, because they didn't reinvent themselves and didn't spot trends. So reinvention has, and this is not a keynote about reinvention, I just want to put that out there because there are people who are more qualified to speak to that than I am. But I think that aspect of reinvention for leadership is incredibly important, and I think any leader should keep it in mind. There are an incredible amount of tools and models, and I highly recommend that you go out and look at reinvention as a concept and what leaders can do to reinvent and what tools they can use to reinvent. The one aspect of reinvention, or the one tool maybe as well, a beautiful analogy that I really think is very useful is biomimicry. I don't know how much you know about it, but it's basically looking at nature and learning from nature, because nature restores itself. Whenever something happens in nature, nature very magically is able to survive. And I think we have a lot to learn from nature, and I think that's what biomimicry is also speaking about. It's a practice to learn from and mimic strategies found in nature. And there's a beautiful quote here as well: life creates conditions conducive to life. So our planet actually has some beautiful cycles that we could learn from and that we've maybe disregarded for a very long time. And there are a couple of aspects of biomimicry that will be relevant for leadership. One of them being, it's important that we adapt to changing conditions and that we're very observant around what happens around us. We need to self-renew. And it sounds philosophical, but even as businesses, we need to self-renew all the time. How do we do that? Two of the things that really help us, and another key leadership trend will help us with it: diversity. Diversity in nature is helping nature survive, and diversity in our organizations will help us survive, but I'll speak to that later. And then also resilience. And you know that that's become a big topic as well, but we need to become even more resilient because there's a lot coming at us in the next couple of years and decades. There's evolving to survive and experimenting. I think we are at times as leaders also so scared to go ahead with something and experiment because it might just fail. But things are so complex these days that often we don't know what the right way of tackling something is. And when I work with leaders, I often say, please encourage the team to try something out. And even if you don't have the answer, they don't have it, try it so that you see what happens and then you'll make your way forward. And it's a new way of thinking because we used to think we need to go with best practice and have plans. But our life has become so complex that actually sometimes we've just got to try it out. And yeah, another element that biomimicry speaks to is be very attuned and responsive to your environment. Look at what's happening, use feedback loops. Interestingly, nature does that too. Form relationships so that you collaborate and are not an island, that you are interdependent. So leaders as reinventors, or leadership and reinvention as a trend. To sum up this trend for you, it is the realization that we have to reinvent continuously in order to survive, actually, and then hopefully thrive. It's about spotting trends, and sometimes, and I quite like this, sometimes things happen so quickly that we can't actually go with research because there hasn't been time to go with research yet. Sometimes we might have to act on instinct, and that's very much not what we do in business, right? I've already spoken to the experimentation. So to not get so attached about the right way, because often there isn't the right way these days. So to allow leaders, but leaders to allow their team to not get it right. This is very connected to that. Because things are very complex at the moment, there is quite a bit of messiness around how we're dealing with them. And I think I coach a lot of leaders as well. Often the overwhelm comes with the internal expectation towards myself that I need to have it all under control and I have to have it neatly wrapped up in a bow and I have to get to the end of my to-do list and so on. And we're not there anymore. And almost that allowing the messiness is going to be very important, both for the leaders themselves, but even the leaders to allow that to their team. It's going to be a bit messy, and it's okay. And lastly, to inspire others to continuously reinvent. I think this is the thing about we need to win the race of tomorrow, and I think we're firefighting. Leaders are firefighting. And to make leaders aware that in addition to the firefighting, we need to look at the future already. We have to do both, otherwise we're going to sink, literally. So this is the first key trend that I wanted to talk to you about. The second key trend is another one, and I actually think the second trend helps us with this one. So the second trend, in my view, and particularly as we are sitting here in South Africa, it is an incredibly important trend. I think it's worldwide, but I do think it's particularly pressing here in South Africa. As South Africa is about as diverse as we can get, right? And I think we still have a very long way to go for integrating and including everyone and working together in the way that we could. So inclusive leadership I've called the subtitle here, Leaders as Role Models in a South African and in a global context. I believe that leaders have a responsibility that goes beyond the business. I think it's almost like a societal responsibility. And you know how divided we still are in South Africa. And I think that creating more inclusion is going to be very, very crucial to role model as a leader in South Africa. I want to tell you a couple of examples. So, what is inclusive leadership? Think about a graduate student who has just joined a company, and she might be sitting in a meeting and they're talking about policies of the company and maybe a potential policy change. It's a real example that I heard from a colleague of mine. Now, this graduate student is sitting there and has a brilliant idea around a potential policy change. She's very young. She's just entered the business and she might be sitting there wondering, I don't know if my voice counts here. I don't know if I can say this. And if she's lucky, she has an inclusive leader who recognizes that it doesn't matter if she's 21 or 22 or if she's 55, she might have a brilliant idea, and to ask, to draw on the idea, and then to be courageous enough to implement it. And the story that I tell you did happen, and someone implemented that policy and it was actually brilliant for them. Similar examples would be, and I have a suspicion you might be able to relate to this. Think about it. There's a woman standing up somewhere, maybe she's mid-20s, holding a presentation, and you going, I don't know if she knows her stuff yet. Or she's so young, you know, I mean, really, she's just come out of university. Or you look at someone who's a little bit older, and you go, oh, gosh, he's a little bit past his time. Can he still deliver something? You know, is he still willing to learn? All these biases that come up for us when we look at someone who might be too old, too young, all the ideas and judgments we have. Inclusive leadership would pick up on that and would actively work against that. A man in his 60s might have decades of experience that really help him have a deep understanding of something, and he might be more eager to learn and more open to learning than someone in their 30s. You never know. A woman in her 20s might just be absolutely brilliant, more brilliant than someone in their 50s. We just don't know. So it's important, no matter who someone is, no matter what biases come up, that we draw on everyone. We need it to reinvent. So this is now where the link is. We're not going to manage all that is happening in our world by thinking the same thing that we've thought for many decades. We need new thinking, and therefore we need everyone. And sometimes the new thinking and the brilliant ideas come from very unexpected places. Two other examples. I don't know if you've heard this. I've heard this a lot. Leaders saying to me, she just doesn't quite fit into our team. Just not a good culture fit. Now, and I know probably many of you are in a people space. Of course, there's something like for instance, a value match. You want people to fundamentally have similar values to you in order to work well together. But this whole thing about, she doesn't fit so well into our team, be careful of it. And I always urge leaders to be careful because yes, someone might be a little different or a little bit uncomfortable for the team, but maybe we just need that, exactly that. Because our affinity bias, you might have heard of it, we love hanging out with people who are like us, but then we stir in the same brain juice the whole time and we never think differently. So maybe to reframe that person that is a little bit uncomfortable for the team, that raises a bit of skepticism in the meeting and go, let me listen carefully here because there might be something in this. An inclusive leader would do that. The other thing that I've put here is the comment, I'm sure he didn't mean it that way. This relates to comments that people are making, and often not maliciously so, but, you know, there's a lot of sexist joking, there's a lot of racism going on in this country, and many other isms. An inclusive leader has a very sensitive ear for that and holds people accountable when they do that. The tricky part sometimes is that sometimes a hugely high performer might be very difficult or joking in inappropriate ways. And then it's we're quick to excuse them, right? But high performance is not everything. It is also who are you being with the other people, and are you contributing to an inclusive culture in our business? Are you contributing to creating a place where everyone, no matter who they are, can belong? And that really is inclusive leadership. It's about creating belonging in a workplace where no matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like, and what your ability, maybe physical ability is, for instance, to be part of it and to be able to contribute. And then lastly, also one of my favorites, but like one of my favorites, we work a lot in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And you might relate to this sentence. I hear this quite a lot. So we work with senior teams and we challenge senior teams and we say to them, you know what, if you have a senior team of 8 people and everyone is white and male, don't be surprised that black professionals are not feeling very comfortable because they're looking at you and going, where is my future path in this organization? So we do a lot of challenging here, and what we have here quite often is, I'm totally committed to transformation. I really am. I want to support it, but we just cannot find the right person with the right skill set for the senior team. That might be very true or feel true for that person in the moment, but our question then is, pardon?
Why can't you develop them?
Why can't you develop them? Absolutely. So, what have you done so far in the last 5 years to develop someone into that role? Okay, if you haven't, what have you put in place to have someone in this role in the next 1 or 2 years? Have you looked widely enough? Because we look in the same places all the time. And quite frankly, there are an incredible amount of incredibly talented people in this country, and we're not looking hard enough, I think. Have you considered shifting the role description slightly so that someone else can fit that role description? And just because you're committed to being inclusive and having representation. An inclusive leader, and I guess that's all about inclusive leadership, would do that, would stand for that, would work on that. So, 2 trends, leadership and reinvention, and inclusive leadership. I think both of which are incredibly important worldwide. The second one, worldwide and in South Africa, very, very, very important. So inclusive leadership is around creating safety for all in the business, in an organization. It's about recognizing the value and uniqueness of people. And I can tell you a lot of the time, and we do this with our leaders, is we don't look hard enough at the gold. We don't look hard enough for the gold in someone. And you do know that people show their gold when there's the right condition. It's about bringing in, and particularly bringing in, the marginalized voices. And this is what we need to be aware of here. Just really to be aware that, for instance, even today in the boardroom or in meeting rooms in South Africa, people who were previously disadvantaged are less likely to speak up first. How about drawing out people more? There's so much still going on that is not okay. And then lastly, and most importantly here, we have such a powerful role as leaders in South Africa. We need to promote equity more strongly. We need to speak up about it. And we need to do more. We need to do more as well. I see a lot of people speak, but then what are they doing? So this as the second trend that I think is incredibly important here and beyond. And I actually think if we get that one right in South Africa, it's going to take us a very long time. But I do think that the rest of the world, we have 30 German colleagues here at the moment visiting us in Cape Town. I think there's a lot to learn from here and about challenges we have, but also how we master them. So if we get this one right, I think we could teach the world how to do this. The third trend and last trend is something that I am I'm passionate about it all, actually. But this one is very close to my heart as well. I mentioned in my introduction that I'm very passionate about women in leadership. Firstly, I guess I am a woman leader. I know some of the challenges that women leaders have, but also because I think there's something very special that women leaders bring into organizations. My favorite story, actually, that I heard about, 2 months ago, was the first woman in a C-suite in a large organization. She came into the C-suite. She was a mom, and she requested and she discussed with her fellow C-suite leaders, who were all men, that she didn't want to meet past 6 p.m. at night because she would like to have dinner with her family. Guess what? Everyone loved it. Everyone loved it. All the men loved it. They loved going home at 6 p.m., being able to have dinner with their families, even if it meant that they were doing some more work at night. But she just put a boundary in place that was actually a very humane boundary. And she brought that in, and it benefited everyone. But this last trend is not about women in leadership. I actually want to say it's about something more than that. It's about something bigger than that. It's about, and I call it feminine intelligence in business. The subtitle, in case you can't read it, I called it balancing opposing energies or balancing opposing qualities to create a new world and to create new work. What do I mean by opposing qualities? So if I ask you, and really gut feel, don't overthink it, which of these pictures would you associate with a more feminine energy, and which picture would you associate with a more masculine energy? Just shout it out. It's a bit of, left feminine and right masculine, right? Okay. So we have a feeling, we maybe can't even, we have a feeling what we associate with what, right? I'm going to ask you a couple of words as well and do the same thing, just to get a sense. So if you look at these 4 words, all 4 of them, clarity, certainty, confidence, and strength, which one would you associate it with? Masculine. Care and compassion, listening, and intuition. Interconnectedness, pause, and flow. Linear thinking, drive, competition, and assertiveness. Love and kindness, sensitivity, and vulnerability. Logic and focus, thinking and clear outputs. Feminine, you're just trying to mix it up a bit, eh? Of course. And I want to say that we are not talking about men and women. I'm not talking about men and women. I am talking about a quality of energy that any human being, no matter how they identify themselves in this world, can have within them and show them. We all have it all, right? So we have these traits that we associate with masculine and feminine. And yes, at the moment in the world, I believe we still have mental models where we actually associate the one maybe a little bit more with men and the other one with women. But that's just an aside. See the scale that I've put here. I've put them in the scale. And I guess what I want to ask you, and it's also slightly rhetorical, I own that, which qualities do you think are driving our organizations? Which qualities are weighing more heavily, are valued maybe more heavily, are looked for more when we look at success in organizations? The masculine. So I know that I, don't have to really tell you that. So I think it's looking a little bit like this still, that traditionally we looked at clear outputs, KPIs, we look at a lot of things that we would associate with the left. And we need them. I'm not actually saying, so it's not about, I'm not wanting to promote that we now need to chuck out the left and we need to bring in the right. That's not what I mean at all. But what I do think is needed at the moment is a little bit of a rebalancing. So slightly more focus on bringing in the feminine. The masculine is in. We've got it. And I think we need more of the feminine. And then hopefully one day we have a beautiful mix where we don't even have to talk about masculine and feminine. So it's almost like I want to use masculine and feminine as our mental models at the moment because I think it's helpful, not because I think this is the framework we need to be thinking into the future. That's not what I actually think. But I think at the moment, in the short and medium term, we need to uplift the feminine intelligence so that we can find a good balance, and then we can chuck out the concepts. But at the moment, I think it's quite useful. And I want to tell you what happened with me and how I came up with this trend. I actually, and it fits with this trend, I went with an intuition. So in my work with leaders, I just had a sense of, and in my work with women leaders also, I thought, we need more of this. We need more of this. So I started putting together the thinking about feminine intelligence, and then I thought, I've got to back it with research, and I've got to, the typical, like, I need to find stats now. I'm not going to give you stats. But what I do want to tell you, when I then started looking and thinking more about it, I realized actually in the last 10, 20 years, we've already had a lot of movement towards the feminine intelligence. So if you think of servant leadership, if you think of the humble leader, if you think of leaders as coaches, the coaching mode, all of this is more feminine in what maybe we would say. So it's not completely new. And then there are newer things. This is just a graphic taken from a French man, Frédéric Laloux, his name is, speaking, ironically, he calls it reinventing organizations, but he speaks about organizations needing to move from army to, having moved, army, machine, family, which is what we looked at, and now living organism. It's interesting. Can you hear almost the link to biomimicry? I find that so interesting. And he talks about relationship drive, focusing on people. Then we have Theory U, Otto Scharmer. I don't know if you know him, but if you think about it, that's also not new, but it's also thinking about how do we bring the whole humanity into the workplace? How do we let people emerge, things emerge, rather than kind of trying to control it all? We have, I don't know if you've heard of this book, Humanocracy, going away from bureaucracy to humanocracy, looking at people. So all of this is pointing towards we need more of that feminine intelligence in order to work together and actually to survive and thrive. Lastly, I looked at a report the other day, it was done last year as well, where they spoke about 5 new leadership trends, and I found another few words that really resonated with that feminine element. It was around unbossing. They talked about unbossing. They talked about paradox leadership. They talked about healthy leadership. All of that for me points to feminine intelligence as well. I've now mixed the colors and I've mixed all the traits. This would be the end point for me where it doesn't really matter. We can bring them together, and we can, as human beings, no matter how we identify, we can live these in our own mix. So feminine intelligence for me in leadership would be looking at collective well-being rather than individual pursuits of happiness. I think we've got a lot of me going on in business. And I think we need to start looking at how are we all, because how can I be well if the whole isn't well? And I think we see that in the world at the moment. And I think leaders need to promote that more. We need to then, if that can happen, we might even reimagine a company's place in the world. Maybe companies would really look more not only at making money, but what are we doing to the world? What are we doing with the world? What good are we doing? It's about compassion, it's about intuition, it's about interconnectedness rather than only linear thinking. We're not going to solve things with linear thinking anymore. And this is something I feel strongly about as well, working with a lot of leaders who are terribly burnt out. We need to care for each other and our bodies. We are so disconnected from our bodies. We don't pause, we don't take breaks. We log out, we log into the next meeting. My first question to someone is, have you just logged in from... Yeah, I've just logged in from another meeting. We don't even take 2 minutes breaks between meetings. And feminine energy is body, compassion, care for us and care for others. And then lastly, and I think this is also very interesting, I think often people were thinking about how do I make my mark in the world? What's the important thing I'm going to be doing? But what about the second intelligence around a wisdom, around a flow, around knowing things are maybe cyclic, things are sometimes up, sometimes down, and I can't always push without a regard for what's really going on in human beings. So this for me is feminine intelligence. One element I quickly want to tell you also about this element of both being important is, and I was just talking last night with a friend of mine about it. She is part of a board of directors of a group of companies. And she has replaced a director who incorporated a lot of the masculine energy. He went to the CEOs of their respective businesses and he told them what to do. He provided structure. He gave a lot of guidance, which was wonderful for many years. She's now coming in, and she's someone who encompasses a lot of feminine intelligence just naturally. And she's come in and she's asked the CEOs questions. She left space for them to think, to decide what they wanted to do with their businesses. And it's very appropriate, and they're coming up with great ideas. They've got more space now. But I thought it was a beautiful example of both are needed at different times. So it's not, I want to reiterate again, it's not about throwing out the one and replacing it. It's just about lifting the one a little more and bringing it in more. Because quite frankly, I think it'll help us solve some of the challenges we have and hopefully save our planet. It sounds very big, but I really think that's needed. So I spoke to you about 3 leadership trends: inclusive leadership, leadership and reinvention, and feminine intelligence in leadership. Lastly, I want you to think back to your 2 words or 2 qualities. And I want you to think 2 questions. Are they maybe linked to feminine intelligence? I'm not sure. Sometimes people think of like a vulnerable space. Maybe they don't want to show too much. Or if they don't link to that, would they help you in reinventing if you did show them? What would we be gaining if you showed them? Or inclusive leadership. If you had an inclusive leader who welcomed all of you, would you be able to show that more? And I'm hoping some of your answers would be yes, and that showing some of that and all of you would actually be really helpful. And hopefully if we get these things right, they will really contribute to us creating a new world, a new work and a new world. And I want to end just with a quote that I really, really love. Hopefully we'll get this right. Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. That's me.